In the Launch and Teardown Settings section of the Preferences for Espresso Test Recorder, you will see options for clearing app data before and after the test recording. A common problem you'll run into with Espresso testing is that of shared state. Shared state means that the values stored in memory while your app is running and the values written to disk are not cleared between test runs. Each test executes on the application state that was left behind from the previous test execution. Espresso Test Recorder has tried to combat this problem of shared state and remove this complexity for you by clearing the app data before and after the test recording. This helps ensure that your app is in a clean state and that the first execution of your test won't encounter shared state issues. I suggest leaving these values as they are to help combat the problem of shared state, but it's good to know these preferences are here and how that affects test recording and execution. To better understand the problem, let's run our recorded test 2 times in a row and see what happens. The first time we run the test, it passes. But the second time it runs, it fails. That's because our app has logic to store a shared preference value for the Remember Me checkbox. If this was checked upon login, then that value is stored as a preference, and upon the next launch of the login activity, the user will be forwarded directly to the home screen. Let's look at why this happens. When Android instrumentation tests are run, your application is launched, and then each test is run sequentially, but nothing is cleared out of memory or storage between tests. When there is no resetting of application data to simulate an uninstall and reinstall, you will be executing your tests in a non-hermetic environment. Hermetic is defined as a seal or enclosure which is complete and airtight. In terms of testing, we do not, by default, have a sealed-off hermetic environment because the last test state leaks into subsequent test runs. In order to have a hermetic test execution environment, we need our application process restarted to clear any in-memory state and the state of any background services. We'd also need our app's data to be completely cleared as if it got uninstalled and reinstalled. If this occurs, we have a hermetic test execution environment. There are 2 strategies to combat this problem of shared state. The first is really a hack, since it doesn't completely address the problem, but works around it. In this case, we would attempt to manually reset the app state programmatically between each test run. To do this, we would update our test to add a method annotated with before. This is a JUnit annotation that would ensure that this method is run before each test is run. In this case, we have a custom user preferences utility that we've built previously that we can use to reset the value of the preference before each test run. Let's go ahead and start the test again. You see here that the test actually failed. The reason why is because the activity is launching before we are clearing the preferences. In order to get around this, we need to tell the activity test rule that we will launch the activity ourselves by setting launch activity to false. We can then use the test rule to launch the activity after we have cleared the preferences in our setup method. After we make this change and rerun our tests, they now pass every time. The problem with this strategy is that it is a hack, and as your application grows in size and complexity, there are more and more things to reset, and battling shared state becomes a complex problem. In order to alleviate ourselves of this issue, a second option has been introduced with the Android Testing Support Library version 1.0.0. This release contains the Android Test Orchestrator, which completely resets your app process and clears data between each test run. This requires custom configuration and additional APKs to be installed on your device, but it is something worthwhile as your test suite grows in size and complexity. Be sure to check out the lesson on Android Test Orchestrator to learn how to set it up. We now have a good understanding of the problem of shared state. This knowledge empowers us to create more stable and reliable Espresso test suites.